There we go. We're now recording, and welcome again, everybody. We are going to visit today about meeting facilitation. If you have colleagues who you wanted to have participate in this and they aren't here right now, know that this will be posted to our YouTube channel in a few days, along with a link to the PDF that you'll be receiving after this meeting. See if that shows up on my camera at all. We will go to screen sharing, and that means that we will be limited in being able to see each other in the gallery. But we will do our best. So today we are talking about meeting facilitation, and I'm so excited that Olivia Lonsberry from the Patient Safety Movement Foundation has agreed to join us today and share. I have to say, I have been so impressed with Olivia's meeting facilitation skills, and I think this is something that should be taught more often. One of the things we hear most often when we're talking to people about PFACs is somebody took over my meeting, and there are ways to handle that so that you don't come across that and you stay in control, moving that meeting towards your goals. We're going to cover all of these topics, and I'm not going to go through them because this is, you can read, you just take a glance there. That's what we're going to go over. And we're going to talk about what is meeting facilitation. It is the conscious act. In other words, you're making an effort of guiding the meeting process so that it stays on course, to make sure that everyone is participating and that you get to reach the goals you have for your meeting. To do that, you have to have goals, and those goals go along hand in hand with an agenda. You want to maximize your platform for facilitating that meeting. And that means if you're in person and everybody's going to get food, which is what often happens at PFAC meetings, you want them to go ahead and get their food, sit down and start eating before you start your meeting. So build that time into your agenda. You may have an hour planned for your meeting. You may need to ask your participants to show up and be there for an hour and a half so that you can get that food thing taken care of. If it's virtual, ask your people to turn their cameras on, ask them to mute when not speaking, and invite people who comment to share their comments that they have in the chat. Ask somebody else to monitor that chat. Like right now, because I'm talking to you, I can't look at the chat, but maybe somebody else could and speak up if there's something I should be looking at. Try to remind everybody that the meeting is a safe place as you're starting. You have meetings every month. It's good to remind people every month of the same thing. It's kind of a routine that you have, that this is a safe place, and our meetings at CAPS are a safe place too. You're welcome to set some boundaries though, as we will talk about, and remind people that what you discuss in your council meetings is private and should remain private. Got to have an agenda. We had a whole meeting last month on how to do an agenda, so be sure to look that up on our website and on our YouTube page. But it's a roadmap for your meeting. It needs to include all the topics you plan to discuss, who's responsible for the discussion of those topics, and try considering putting a little bit of a time limit there on that topic, so that when that time limit is hit, you say, I'm sorry, we've run out of time for this topic. I know that you and you and you all have comments that are still hanging. I want to hear them. I'll get back to you, and let's include those offline so that you keep your meeting moving. You want to follow that agenda, keep it moving, but some people are going to try to derail your agenda. And it's up to you as the meeting facilitator to say, boy, that is an interesting thought, but it's not exactly where we are going today. I want to hear more though, and set up a time to meet with the person later so that they're not feeling totally shut down. They're just turned off for the moment, and then you're going to come back to them later. But those are the kinds of things you do as a facilitator to follow your agenda and keep your meeting moving forward. If you're doing virtual facilitation, you'll want to go back and see our first webinar that we had in this series that was on virtual facilitation. But just a snippet there is you can use multiple screens to manage. Some platforms will allow you to see your gallery and your screen that you're presenting at the same time if you're using multiple screens. Use one for the presentation and another one to view the gallery. Zoom isn't exactly doing that. I have all of 5 people that I can see right now while I share with you. I don't know how many people you can see, probably a similar number, but we can switch later if we have time for discussion to gallery mode. And finally, what I'm going to say to you is frame the discussion. Be aware of difficult topics. Surely in your PFAC, you've had the opportunity to discuss things that are hard, really hard. When we're talking about something like COVID situations, we're talking about pain management, or we're even talking about loss. Those are difficult topics, and they evoke a lot of emotions from people. If we frame the discussion, we actually help people keep the bounds on their own emotions and give them guidelines for appropriate comments. We want to redirect those who step outside of that frame and bring them back in so that they stay on topic, and always try to acknowledge that what they have to say is important, even if you're asking them to share it with you later, maybe after the meeting, maybe on a phone call, maybe in an email, but give them the opportunity to get that out, but maybe not right now in the meeting. And with that, I want to introduce Olivia Lounsbury to you. And if you don't know Olivia, I encourage you to get to know her. Olivia is working at the Patient Safety Movement Foundation right now, as well as doing about 5 million other things, as you can see here, working on her master's in clinical quality and leadership at Georgetown. And somehow she's also doing work up in New York City while she's working on the West Coast in Orange County. So Olivia, it's not just a master at meeting facilitation, she's also a master at being at multiple places at once. And so I'm going to turn over the next few slides to Olivia.
Well, I don't know how I can follow that introduction, but thank you so much, Lisa, for having me here today. And one thing I will say is in this virtual environment, it's very, very easy to be in multiple places at one time, which is why it's so important to facilitate meetings and to engage those who are in your meetings so that, you have their attention. And, that is the greatest asset that we have as meeting facilitators, to be able to move forward whatever goal or objective that we're trying to push in that meeting. So I do want to just reflect on one of the points that Lisa brought up earlier, which is meeting facilitation is a conscious act. It takes work pre, during, and post. Definitely, the meeting is as good as the preparation right beforehand. But, during the meeting facilitation, it's really, really important to know who you're talking to. And oftentimes we may go into a setting where we have no idea how many people are in the audience, what their disciplines are, what matters to them. Other times we may go into a meeting and know very well, I know Lisa, I know what she's interested in, I know what she can, speak about, and both, have pros and cons. But, particularly in a virtual environment, it's imperative to watch the body language. So, if people are looking dissatisfied, looking away, seeming as though they're uncomfortable with a certain topic that's coming up, it's very, very important to be sensitive to that. and to, guide your response accordingly. If they're seeming uncomfortable with a certain topic that may be, as Lisa mentioned earlier, somewhat contentious, maybe don't call them out right there on the meeting, but instead remember that, take a note of it, make sure that they're okay, build that trusting relationship with them. Again, we're all working towards the same goals and objectives as friends, as colleagues, as peers. So the professional endeavor is just as important as that relationship building with the people that you care about. It's also really important to know your attendees' strengths and weaknesses. So really, you know who to call on. So if I have a question, I know that I might be able to go to Lisa for, a response around how do you effectively engage patients in organizational improvement work, because I know that she's really involved in that and has a lot to say in that area. But also, again, kind of balancing that professional with that personal is understanding what matters to that person. And engaging with them genuinely, acknowledging their concerns, and whether that they've sent you an email the day before that meeting that you're facilitating and you want to acknowledge that in live time. If that's, somebody raised a concern in the chat and you want to, talk about that on the webinar, absolutely acknowledge what matters to those individuals. One of the most important things that I will say to, again, we're building a trusting relationship with those attendees is don't put people on the spot. So instead, cue them up for what you're going to ask them. So if I might ask, Lisa, a question about, can you tell me about some of the barriers that you've had in the past in engaging patients in performance improvement work? And Lisa, before I get there, I just want to remind everybody that X, Y, and Z, so that Lisa has a minute to kind of think about the question I'm asking her without, completely putting her on the spot and muting myself and let her go for it. So if we could go to the next slide. Thank you so much, Lisa. So this invitation for participation is really contingent on how well you've built that relationship and made people feel safe. That is imperative in patient safety, in quality, in patient engagement. Show your own vulnerability. Say, I don't know, or I need your help with this, or I am not an expert in this area. Can someone help me on this? Or acknowledge past mistakes, or acknowledge how you're feeling. Show that you're a vulnerable individual as the leader in the room, and it'll likely garner you some support from those that are in the room with you. I think it's also important to invite attendees to comment. So, raising their hands on the platform, showing them how the chat, the Q&A, the hand raising function sort of works is really important, so that you can kind of, it's not just a matter of muting and unmuting folks, but instead they have other tools in which they can participate. And on that note of using the chat, oftentimes in meetings, we see that there's a lot of conversation happening. People have hands up left and right. If that's happening to you, opt, for some folks to use the chat. If you're saying, we have 4 people with their hands up, if others want to jump in because we only have 5 minutes left, put your thoughts in the chat. I'm going to copy and paste and save the chat for later on, but I want to make sure that I hear from you. So what are all the ways, in especially a virtual environment, that you can hear from people in a limited amount of time? I think it's also really important to ask commenters from virtual meeting chats to expand on their thoughts verbally. So if someone puts something in the chat and it's a little bit ambiguous, or it seems like it may be fueled with a little bit of emotion, absolutely ask that person to share their thoughts if they're comfortable. And as anybody is sharing thoughts and you want to invite that participation, again, genuinely restating and genuinely acknowledging their comments, their concerns is key. One of, I would probably say, the biggest tip that I have for both building a trusting relationship with people, inviting their participation, but staying on task, is restating the comments that people give you in a way that doesn't, put words in their mouth, but rephrases and reframes what they're saying to meet some sort of an objective. So if someone's comment, may seem to open up a can of worms down a rabbit hole, reframe what they're saying and say, Lisa, I think that's really interesting because the point that I pulled from you is XYZ, and that relates to what we're doing because ABC. So that is probably the most imperative thing that I can offer for any sort of advice here. And if you missed the mark, you missed the mark. Again, show your vulnerability and say, oh, I'm so sorry. Can you explain a little bit more about what you mean? I'm sorry if I didn't capture it appropriately. But 9 times out of 10, it'll keep you on track. So going into validating the participants here, this is kind of exactly, what I was just talking about, is verbally and non-verbally. So yes, it's very important to say, thank you for sharing that. I see why you're concerned, but also raising your eyebrows, talking with your hands, smiling, nodding at them, making it feel as though they're in the room with you and can kind of pick up on your energy, as a compliment to, your verbalization of, really great job. I like the point that you just made. And the last thing I'll say about validating our participants is showing again how their feedback is being used towards that objective or theme. Lisa, really great point. I didn't think about that as we're pursuing this goal or objective. There we go. So this one is definitely challenging. As Lisa mentioned earlier, we are in a contentious time and it's very hard to pick up on body language, especially in virtual meeting environments. But being neutral is key. And again, keeping that positive tone. If you sense that a meeting is starting to go one way or another, or we're starting to get, into fueled emotions, keep the positive tone, rephrase what's being said without putting words in people's mouths, and acknowledge the feedback is really imperative to push forward whatever it is that you're trying to push forward in the meeting. If it seems as though there is some sort of a contention or a perspective that you want to investigate further, or maybe the individual just needs a space to talk and now may not be the best time, you know who the individual is. Reach out to them via email afterwards, schedule some time with them, talk through what might be some of the factors that contributed to some of their comments that may or may not have derailed the conversation. And on that note, as we're talking about dealing with our detractors here, this is probably one of the hardest things to do. But again, I'm going to re-emphasize, listen genuinely to what people are saying and pull, if it seems as though the individual may be going down a rabbit hole, pull on an aspect of what we're saying and say, Lisa, I really liked this point that you were bringing up. How can you restate that in a way that pulls the group back to what we're trying to do in the meeting? Even if it's just one snippet of what that person said and the rest, seem to be going down a rabbit hole, that person still has really, really meaningful insight for what you're trying to do within your project. Again, going back to dealing with detractors, it all goes back to how you prepared for the call. So are they detracting because they're purposely doing so, or are they really, really trying to be helpful? And that goes back to, do they have enough context to know what's already been discussed? Do they have enough background to understand the problem at hand? So again, all of this goes into how much context does the individual have so that they can focus on, here is the point that we're trying to, discuss here today. Here's the problem that we're trying to talk about. Here's what's been done in the past. And oftentimes what I like to do, and I don't mean to bring a clinical perspective in here because I'm not a clinician, but something that is helpful for me is an SBAR sort of framework. So when you're starting a meeting, what is the situation? What is your current state of what you're talking about? What's the background? What has happened in the past? Where are we right now? And then what are our recommendations for improvement? And that's going to cue people up really well to, all right, now we're all on the same page. The last thing that I'm going to say is, we as human beings are really visual people. And in a virtual environment, we are staring at a screen for probably 10, 11, 12 hours a day. Make it visual, minimize the words on the page, and make it so that people can, at a glimpse, figure out exactly what's going on. And they're like, okay, I'm ready to go. We all live very chaotic lives. We're very, very busy. There's a lot going on. It's very important to, make sure that people feel confident as soon as you possibly can so you can get your meeting started.
Okay, boy, you can see why I'm a fan of Olivia Lounsbury. Olivia, thank you so much for sharing those insights. And Olivia does this all day long for the Patient Safety Movement Foundation. If you're not familiar with the Patient Safety Movement Foundation, please look them up and at patientsafetymovement.org and look up some of the apps that they put together. Olivia, tell me what apps means.
Those are our actionable patient safety solutions. So APSS apps. And thanks, Lisa.
So there are apps for all kinds of things that have been put together by with Olivia working with clinicians and also patients and family members. So we keep that patient and family engagement part of the solutions. And they're looking at clinical workflows and leadership issues and all kinds of things. So it's really worth checking out the work that is being done there. In the end, when you're done with a meeting, what you want to do is summarize the discussion. So this is what we went over today. And as part of that, you're going to want to review any assignments that are made so that you cement that. Now, you may want to follow up also with your PFAC, for example, by email later and say, we did this and this and this, and you said you would do this. And Olivia is really good at that. She gets right on sending out those reminder emails. And Olivia, I have some ARC information for you. Don't let me forget to send that to you. Anyway, the important thing is that we keep that whole concept of collaboration and working together flowing. It doesn't actually end in the end of the meeting. It keeps right on going with the follow-up on what you talked about. Also, include a by when date on when somebody's going to get whatever their assignment was done, because most people will do the assignment on the day you ask them to have it due. That's just the way we are, isn't it? So if you give them a date and it's before your next meeting, you'll get it done before your next meeting. Otherwise, you run the risk of it not being done at all. And do set a follow-up meeting. And even if you have a regular time that you're meeting with your group, remind them of when the next meeting is. Again, because of how people are, it's just, you're going to have more people who do attend and are part of your organization. So now I want to know if you have any questions, and please feel free to unmute yourself. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Anybody? I see a lot of friends here, actually. I see Janice and Mark. Any questions?
Well, Lisa, in lieu of the silence, I'm going to throw something at the table here.
Okay, go.
First of all, I love these slides. I think they're fantastic, and I'm going to hire Olivia for all my presentations. So Olivia, you've just been hired. No, I think, you know, when I spend time with any organization helping them build a patient family advisory council, there's one thing that I emphasize, and that is to really have a strong, robust orientation, because that leads into the segment of facilitation. It makes the facilitator's job a little bit easier if you've oriented your council members properly and emphasize dignity and respect, because dignity is one of the most important things to the human spirit. And it means being valued and respected for what you are, what you believe in, and how you live your life. So in the long run, if you spend more time in proper orientation, you will find it that when you have your meetings, that everyone is in the same mode. Everyone is respectful of one another, and they know that that's not a place to, it's not a place to complain. So it makes the facilitator's job a little bit easier. I just wanted to point that out.
Boy, I really appreciate you bringing that up, Armando. And I know that's part of what you emphasize in the work you're going to explain in just a second. I want to say that it is so important to start out with good training in the beginning and emphasize why people are there and what they're doing and how you're going to be running these meetings, and that you want to keep them on topic so that they know ahead of time. And that helps you later come back and say, remember when we said, well, that's why we do this. And it's kind of a human resource thing. It just makes that so much easier. I want to remind you that you will receive by email personally from me. I will be rapidly typing after this meeting a PDF of this, the how-tos that we've just talked about. And if you have any questions, you're always welcome to get back in touch with me. And this will also be posted, as I mentioned earlier, to our YouTube channel. This is the contact information that will also be on the PDF. And now I would like to have Armando just take a couple of minutes and tell us about the Patient and Family Advisory Council for Quality and Safety H2PI program that's been put together. Armando?
Sure. Thank you very much, Lisa. So because, COVID came around and you really building PFACs has always been done as an in-person kind of training. We felt that we had to come up with that solution, and Zoom was just not good enough, or really any other platform that we checked was not really good enough to have a proper training on virtually. So we came up with this piece of software that's has built-in artificial intelligence. And over the course of last winter, we built all these modules so that any organization can embark on their journey of building a PFAC by just going over step by step, following the modules. And the way it's set up is really clever because it won't let you go into the next part of the journey unless you've completed the one before. And we have 35 different modules built in. The first one where you see that in the top left, it says start here. That's actually a learning of the platform. And then the PFAC overview is when it starts. But we have 35 different modules, and we even include what happens after you have a PFAC and you get a little bit stagnated. So we built a journey there called PFAC 2.0. It's an elevated way of raising the work of your PFAC and bringing your council members into clinical work, which is not an easy thing to do. But we built a module for that. And afterwards, you get a certificate. This is totally customizable. Where you see the logo on the top left that says Activate, that's where the organization, your organization's logo will go in. And then the color scheme would be adapted to your organization. So it's totally customizable, but it's really, really wonderful thing. And anybody that wants to have a demo, just reach out to me and we'll guide you through it. It's just a wonderful platform. Thank you, Lisa.
Great. Thank you, Armando. And it's always great to share the good work that Armando is doing. I am so excited for next month, and I hope you like these little half-hour get in and get out re-energizing your PFAC sessions. And next month, it is, after all, December, we're going to talk about celebrations and celebrating and recognizing and honoring your PFAC members. We have lots of ideas around how you can do that. And this helps with your engagement and your long-term keeping people engaged and active with your PFAC community. That will be on December 14th, same time, same channel, but you'll need to register in advance so that you will get the PDF that we'll be sending out afterwards. Thanks so much, everybody, for participating. This will end our meeting. And if you have any questions, though, please feel free to get in touch. We'll look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the information.
Thanks, Olivia. Awesome job.
Absolutely. I did.